Hello and welcome, everyone. Obligatory first question, can everyone hear me? Excellent. So welcome to this talk, Building Amazing Search with the Search API. My name is Thomas Seidel and about Drunken Monkey on Drupal.org or most other sites. And in this session, I will give you a quick live demo of how to set up the Search API and hopefully make an amazing search on your own site too. So this will be pretty entry level. If you're already an advanced Search API user, chances are you won't learn anything new here, just as a warning. Also, please feel free to ask questions at any time, though I have to apologize in advance that, of course, with the setup, it might take me a while to notice your questions. And finally, please tell me if the font size is too small in the browser later. Yeah, I zoomed in a bit and I hope it will be okay, but yeah, please tell me. Okay, so let's get started with this session. Yeah. First off, a quick background, a couple of background infos. The Search API module, what is it, why do we need it? It was developed by me in 2010, so 11 years ago for Drupal 7 as a replacement for the core search module, with the idea of making a more flexible module, a more powerful module, one which other modules could better use to build their own search functionality on. So back in Drupal 6, there were just several different modules for different search engines, and each had to have the same basic boilerplate code. So the Search API was built to make all of this, have all of this in one place, make it more configurable, and give other modules a better chance to integrate with this. Yeah, you have lots of configuration options, which of course also makes the module a bit more complex than the core search module, which is yeah, why it's a good idea to have such a tutorial. Yeah, you can use different search engines with the module, and one of the most important features is a comprehensive views integration. So you can, I guess all of you will be familiar with the views module, which is now in core. And this is completely integrated with Search API module. So you can use views to create search pages using Search API. So you have all that flexibility of views there as well. And just a quick overview of the internal structure. The two principal configuration entities used in the Search API are the search index and the search server. The index is the backend independent configuration. It defines what is being indexed. So is it content, is it comments, is it user profiles, products, what fields are indexed, how they're processed. And the server then takes care of the backend dependent part. So when you index content, when you search it, where does the request actually go? Where is all of this stored? It can be a database, it can be Apache Solr, can be Elasticsearch, etc. And since other modules then just reference the search index for their configuration, so for example, facets, then that means that you can later switch the server while every other configuration regarding your searches stays intact and keeps working the same. So this makes it very easy to later switch the backend you're using for any reason. Okay, with that out of the way, just noting that I'm not seeing the emojis in the chat. So if you want to raise your hand, hand raise emoji is not enough. Please just write me. Okay, yeah, let's get started. This is a simple demo site I set up. We start, of course, by installing the necessary modules. That is, for one, the Search API module, and then at least one module which provides backend. We'll start with the database backend that is provided, bundled together with the Search API. So you'll always have that as an option. And it's the most simple backend, really, which just uses the database, so no further external setup is required. You could also use this module, the database search defaults, which when you're using the standard profile of Drupal already gives you a working search on your site, completely configured. So you can use that to get started right away and hit the ground running, so to speak. But of course, that would be cheating now, so we won't do that now. Yeah, we'll install these two modules. Go to the configuration page of Search API, bookmark it. And then we first add a server, a database server. So we call it database server. Backend is the only option, database for now, because we have no other module installed. And minimum word length 3 is a good option. You can also configure partial matching, but that's about it for a database backend. And then we, as explained earlier, have to also configure an index, which will take a bit longer. For this example, we'll just index content, which is, of course, the most popular option, I guess. So we pick the data source here, content. As said, you have comment here, you have terms or users here, if you want to index those. You can also have multiple data sources. Just a quick note on that. Even if you don't check taxonomy terms here, you can still index the taxonomy terms that are on the content. So if the content has a tags field, for example, you can still index those tags, checking taxonomy term here. So enabling the taxonomy term data source will give you taxonomy terms as a first level result. So returning really taxonomy terms on their own, which is in most cases not what you want, but could in some cases also be handy, of course. Yeah, then some advanced configuration, which we'll not go into. We have to pick the server we want to use, the database server we just created in this case. And from the index options, one bears a little more talking about, which is index items immediately. So what does that do? Normally, when you create a new content or edit old content, then the change just gets logged internally in the Search API and later indexed on the server during a cron run. So the changes wouldn't immediately be visible in the searches. And what that option does is, like it says on the lid, just make this process immediate. So as soon as you create or edit a node, the new version of the node becomes available right away in your searches. So this, of course, makes it more responsive to the users. If users can create their own content, then they might otherwise wonder why it's not turning up in searches right away. So it could be confusing if you disable it. Also, disabling might be a security risk, because if you use indexed field data for your access checks, then yeah, the gap between editing content and it becoming indexed might pose a security risk in some edge cases. The major downside is that for more advanced backends like Solr or Elasticsearch, they are generally more performant when you index several documents at once. So you don't want to send single documents like you would with this option. So for larger sites which use Solr or Elasticsearch, turning it off might be a good idea, but you should really make sure that you know what you're doing and that it's okay for your site, because, as said, it could be a security risk. For a database backend or smaller sites, I'd say it's always smaller as in a few changes. It's always a good idea to have this enabled. So as this, of course, applies to our example site, we'll keep this option checked. Once we confirm this page, we get to the next, where we have to select the fields we want indexed. So those will be the fields. So those will be the fields that can be used for full text searching, where you can find words in those fields, and they can be used for filtering and sorting. So any fields you want to use in your search pages later, except for displaying, have to be added here. One very handy field is the rendered HTML output, which is just the HTML that the user would see when visiting that content. So that's more or less what the user normally would expect to find in a search. So adding that is usually a good idea and saves you the trouble of indexing all the fields displayed on the page separately. It's also a good idea to configure a specific search index view mode for that, so that you don't index field labels or other template text that would then be indexed for every single piece of content and make searches for words like submitted or field labels useless. And then, yeah, we just add a few fields we might later want to filter on. And the title, which is already normally contained in the rendered HTML output field, but indexing it again separately gives you the chance to boost it and say it's more relevant than the normal content. So that hits in the title are counted as more relevant than in the other content of the node. So now that we have those fields, we have to select or make sure the types are okay. Full text is the one you want when you want to be able to search through the field value. So find individual words in the field, which is also what we want to do for title. So select that too. If you're using Solr, there will be more full text field type options here. But yeah, these are the ones provided by default. And boost is the one where you can see this field is more important than others. So this is boost 1, this is boost 8. So we know, okay, title is more important. The other fields look good. So we saved that. And one final step of configuring the index are the processors. So what are processors? Processors are plugins configured in the index and can influence the searching and indexing in several ways, adding fields to documents or changing fields, changing the search query, adding filters maybe, adding things to the search results. You can make the searches ignore case, you can add highlighting, you can add access checks this way, and much, much more. One important thing to keep in mind, though, if you're using another backend like Solr or Elasticsearch, or really almost all dedicated search engines as a backend, then they usually already implement things like making searches ignore case or stemming or tokenizing. So while the search API provides processors that do this, they should be disabled for those backends because otherwise the two might conflict. In our case, though, of course, we use a database backend for now, so we want most of those processes as well. We also want to add content access, which is usually a very good idea when you're searching content. It just makes sure that users can only see those results in the searches that they can normally also see. It doesn't work with all access modules, so if you have some module set up that uses some advanced access mechanisms, it might not work correctly with this. You have to try that out. But with the usual access mechanisms provided by Drupal core and some other modules, this works well. Just a reminder that you have to enable index items immediately to make sure that you don't run into any edge cases here. We want to add highlighting. HTML filtering is also a good idea if you have any HTML content. Otherwise, the text themselves get indexed, which doesn't make much sense. Ignoring case, stemming, and tokenizing are also usually very good ideas if you're using the database backend. Now we also have the chance to configure these processes further. Most of the settings will already be fine. For the HTML filter, we just have to make sure to only enable it for fields that actually contain HTML. Stripping the title of HTML doesn't make much sense. Yeah, the others should be fine. Just for a tokenizer, check here that the minimum word length is the same as for the database backend we configured earlier, because otherwise, yeah, different numbers here would just be very confusing. And once we save that, we can index the content to make it available for searches. And this already finalizes that part of the setup. We have a working index now. Now we just have to create a search page. And for that, we use views, as mentioned earlier. So we pick the index. We named it content index, so that's what we select here. We create a page. We want to just display teasers. And so we select the teasers here. And as said, you have all the options you would normally have in a view. All the indexed fields are available as filters here. Additionally, things like the item language, and as our site is multilingual in this example, we add that so that we don't get all the languages mixed in our search results. And also the full text search filter is what provides the keywords field. So you want that for almost all searches, I think. Here, filter for the current page's language, and just expose that. Lots of other options here, but one thing, if you have a minimum word length, it's a good idea to also set it here so views can notify users when there are problems with that. Yeah, you can also add sorts for all the indexed fields. You can add contextual filters. You can add menu entries. Let's maybe do that. You can add, normal views. You can configure them any way you want. One little note here, caching. Then two normal ones provided by Core don't work properly with the Search API. So you want to select one of those two. Or of course, since when you have a full text search field, cache hits are very unlikely anyways, you might just go for no caching at all for these views. But let's just use tag-based for now. Save this, view the page. And now when we search for something, we just get results matching that. Or if we search for an author, we just get stuff by that author. The book titles and author names are, in case you hadn't noticed, completely randomly mixed, so don't get confused by that. Now, if you want highlighting when we're using when we're just displaying teasers, we can do that by just adding it to the teaser display. So we have a new field now that Search API has installed, search result excerpt. And when we have the highlighting processor enabled, that becomes available. So if we save the teaser like this, we now get also highlighted snippets in our search results. And if we switch the site to German, we also get results looking the same, just now we've translated everything. Okay. That's already a working search page. Of course, there would be lots of other options to go into, but I'll now switch to switch the site to Solr, so to demonstrate that. So first off, what is Apache Solr? In case you haven't heard of it, it's an open source search engine. It's very flexible and very powerful. So it can deal with almost any amount of documents you could think of. It's really so if you want to if your site gets larger or if you want to improve matching, then just switching to Apache Solr is a very good and pretty simple way to do that. And note, there are of course other great search engines as well, like Elasticsearch, which is pretty popular right now, or lots of others. The thing is that those usually, or as far as I'm aware of, none of them has a really mature Drupal integration so far for Drupal 8 or 9. So while the Apache Solr module is a Search API Solr module is maintained by Markus Kalkbrenner, who does a really great job and is very dedicated, and the module is very mature and has lots of options, lots of flexibility, and is very well integrated into the Search API. If you're using another search engine, even if it might be a better fit in general for your site, you'll most likely run into problems when you're using it with Drupal due to the modules not fitting quite as well. As said, there's a question, will be good to hear more about Solr versus Elasticsearch selection for Search API backend. So Elasticsearch connector is in alpha state right now, and I'm getting lots of bug reports of people not understanding why things don't work. So I don't think Elasticsearch is a good idea right now, unless you want to help improve the module and get it to a really usable and mature state. So the Solr module is really working very well out of the box at this point. So I definitely recommend Solr with Drupal. Even if Elasticsearch has its own merits, the Drupal integration is really the stopper here, I'd say. And so once you have decided to move to Solr, how do you set it up? Two basic options. There are several hosters available. So you can just go there and rent a Solr server. And the other option is to self-host. It's open source, so you can just install it in your own machine or on a machine in your local network, which might be cheaper and improve performance. But of course, using a hosted service frees you of the burden of having to maintain it, upgrade it, etc. yourself. Either way, but especially if you self-host, don't forget security. If you run the normal Solr server, it comes with no security at all. So anyone who guesses the right IP address or URL, they can just access all your index data. They can change it. They can delete it. This is usually not a problem for hosted services, which already provide some access checks. As far as I'm aware, all of them. But if you self-host, make sure that your Solr server is secure. Otherwise, people have a easy time sabotaging you or stealing data. Okay, now with that out of the way, let us switch to Solr. For that, we first enable the Solr module, of course, Search API Solr. I already set up a Solr server locally, so I don't have to do that for now. We just have to define the server in the Search API as well. We call it Solr server, not very inventive, but fitting. Pick the standard connector. These settings are already the right defaults for the default Solr application. We just have to specify our core name. I'm calling it demo, and there's lots of options as well. Highlighted snippets, for example. Now we see the Solr server could be reached, but the core could not be accessed yet. I haven't defined the core yet. I could now use these to, for example, if I know what I'm doing, change some of the field types or request handlers, etc. So there's really a powerful config generator built into the Search API Solr module now. Once you have that set up, or if you don't care to customize this at the moment, we download this config file. Then we go to the server Solr directory in our Solr installation, create a new demo directory with a config directory inside. And then we unzip the config file we just downloaded. And then we just need to tell Solr about this new core. So tell it to create the core. We're doing this with this command. Demo. And that's it. If you reload now, we see the core, Solr core could be accessed. We get the latency and some additional info. 0 items as of now, because we still, the content index is still attached to a database server. So let's change that. Just switch it to the Solr server here. We also get some more options here for indexes attached to Solr servers. Save that, and that's already more or less all for switching. Just as noted before, some of the processors should now be disabled, but they are all marked now with this sentence. It is recommended not to use this processor with the selected server. Pretty self-explanatory, so just disable all of those, and you can't even enable the others that we haven't enabled before via the UI at least, so to make sure that you don't create bad setup. And a tiny note, you want to also remove the tag boosts from the HTML filter for Solr. It's a tiny problem if you don't, so don't worry too much about it, but just as a tip because you joined my session. So we just index those items now, that they are also available on the Solr server. Go to the Solr server, we now see 246 items. They are sent but not yet processed because Solr has a slight gap between indexing and committing the changes, so they really become available in searches. But if we now reload it, they are gone. Okay, the Search API fast module, which I don't even know, can apparently improve indexing speeds with large amount of entities. Cool. So might want to check that out. Thanks for the tip, Alexei. And now if we go back to the site, to our search, we see the exact same thing, but you just have to take my word for it that it's now powered by Solr underneath. Should all work exactly the same as before. Just if you have a lot of data, it would now be quicker and maybe better matching. So what more is there? A few other extension modules that might be interesting. The two most popular ones are probably facets and autocomplete. Facets for adding faceted filtering to your search. So dynamic filters, which let you drill down into search results, and autocomplete, which adds auto suggestions while the user types to your search fields. Pages is a different way of setting up search pages that don't use views, so it's less flexible but faster, and also simpler to configure. Saved searches for creating search alerts. Elasticsearch connector for using Elasticsearch, location for having location searches, proximity filters, etc. And lots more. There is a list projects that extend this linked on the project page of the Search API. Just go there and browse through them. I'm pretty sure I don't know them all either, so there might be interesting things for you. So I'd suggest I'd now show you facets and autocomplete in action. But first of all, I want to ask, are there any questions so far? Other things you might want me to showcase or explain? Three, two, one. Okay, then facets and autocomplete it is. Back to the live demo. So again, we need to, of course, install the relatively module. Oh, CQ&A. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Link to download. I posted in the chat at the top. I can post it again. Or do you mean the presentation, the slides? The presentation will be online, I think, tomorrow in the replay tab of the conference. I don't know when Search API will move to Drupal core. It's a very, very large undertaking. So there would have to be enough interest and then lots of work. So there aren't any plans I'm aware of at the moment. Min character limit for full text search. If you're using Solr, yeah, there is the minimum character filter, I think. So just look into your schema or schema extra fields file for the right filter and configure that, or just remove the minimum character filter. I haven't used Search API with the group module yet, so I don't know what would be possible with that. In general, you can index most fields, so then filtering by them should work, but I can't be sure. I'm just seeing I'm answering them in reverse order, sorry, but yeah. Example with geolocation, I'm afraid I haven't set up my site with any geolocation information, my example site, so I can't really demonstrate it. Sorry. I also don't know what shape the Drupal 8.9 module of search by location is in. What are the best solutions to implement site search with morphology without external database? I don't know what morphology is, sorry. How to deal with per entity custom permissions when querying search by index. Depending on how those are set up, the content access processor will also already work. If it doesn't, then probably you have to write custom code for that, I'm afraid. I don't think there will be another way unless you can somehow get the information into the index in a way that you can place filters on. What are the best ways to raw output dump of search by index directly from database? Will Search API Devil be reinvented for Drupal 8.9? I'm not the maintainer of Search API Devil, or if that, I don't even know about it, so not sure. You can always just use execute PHP from the Devil PHP module, and yeah, in the docs, there is a page about how to execute searches programmatically, which you can use to get search results. And otherwise, you can, of course, also just look directly into the database. All the tables prefixed with search API DB are those used by the database backend. Why do we have to remove the tag boost from the HTML filter when using Solr? That's an interesting question. The problem is the tag boost says, okay, if you have, for example, a strong tag in HTML, then that part inside the strong tags will have a higher boost, like say boost 3 or 3 times the boost of the normal content. And which, yeah, makes kind of sense. If something is in bold, it's probably more important. But Solr doesn't support per field value boosting, so there's no way to actually tell Solr about this. So the configuration becomes useless in that way. But worse than that, because for doing this, the HTML filter has to split the field value into separate values with different boosts. So now the whole field value is not sent to Solr, but just the chunks from the different tags, which means that something like phrase queries across tag borders. So if part of the phrase is before the strong tag and part is inside the strong tag, then the phrase query wouldn't work anymore in Solr. So in some edge cases, this would even be a problem, a small one. And in any case, it would do you no good to have tag boosts because Solr doesn't recognize them. So that, in a nutshell, is the reason. I hope that's clear now. But yeah, as I said, it's not a big deal if you forget to do that. So I think that was all of them. Sorry, I didn't see the small red dot right next to the QA. Oh, and I'll see a poll. Do you still use default Drupal search together with Search API? I would strongly recommend not doing that. There were several instances where the two interfered, so you might run into problems having both of them enabled on your site. Yeah, if once you have set up Search API, it should really do all the searching on your site. Okay, and in the chat, okay. Yeah, I agree, Alexei. Configuring Search API location isn't that easy, but 45 minutes is really, really a short time. So I'm glad that we seem to manage to do facets and autocomplete too quickly, but yeah, location I don't think would have fitted anyways. How can I output rendered Solr content directly without querying the database again? I'm sorry, that's a bit complex, so I don't think I can explain that here. There's unfortunately lots of different things you have to configure correctly to make sure the database isn't queried at some point for access checks, for example. So you have to disable access checks in views. I could at least show that. So query settings, skip item access checks will not load the entities for access checking, which is one step for getting just Solr to do it. Of course, you have to index the rendered output in Solr and also not run the HTML filter on it because that will strip all the HTML. And yeah, then you have to be careful in your view to only use fields that are provided, are indexed. So rendered entity, of course, won't work. You have to use fields. It's just a quick overview. And then authored on, yeah, you can use all those indexed fields, but then you also have to disable this option, use entity field rendering, because that would again have to load the entity. And yeah, then at this point you can listen, yeah, just use Xdebug or something to put a breakpoint in the load item method of the Search API and see if there's any item loading still going on and where it's coming from. But yeah, that should already put you pretty nearly to where you want to be to avoid database queries completely. Okay, so facets and autocomplete. For that, we enable, or did I already? No. Facets and Search API autocomplete. Enable those. Go to the Search API settings. Autocomplete is just configured on the index itself. We just have to enable it for the search. Then it helpfully tells us to set the permissions, because each search gets its own autocomplete permissions, because of course searches can have access restrictions of their own. And if someone isn't allowed to use a search, then they also most likely shouldn't be allowed to use the autocomplete for it. But in our case, there are no access restrictions, so we just enable it for anyone. Save that. Then we can also configure that. Use one of the Solr provided suggestors, for example. We could configure that further. Yeah, lots of options once again. Most of the time it's okay to ignore them. Otherwise, yeah, you can of course just read through them and see if anything sounds like a good idea. And second, facets, let's do those right away too. The facet source is refers to the views display that displays the search page. So the one we have now is this one. We can add a facet for that. View search display page. So the one, our search page, the only one that exists. We have to pick the field which we want to filter on or facet on. We demonstrate it for genre. Genre is a taxonomy term field, a taxonomy term reference field on the content. So you can read through all those options and see if some of them sound like a good idea. An important one for taxonomy term references is this one. Taxonomy term references are just indexed as IDs. So without this, the user would just get the facets as numbers, not as the genre names. So this would be pretty useless. And yeah, rest of that should be okay. And finally, we have to place the facet block too. Otherwise, nothing will happen. Genre facets. We place the block. Put it on top. We now go back to the search. We see there is an autocomplete thingy. It's autocomplete. And facets, so we can drill down into results. I checked OR, so we can have multiple ones, and yeah, these will increase the number of results. Okay, we're pretty near the end of the session anyways. So are there any further questions? Anything I can quickly show you maybe? How can you add facet to filter by data source? Good question. Let's see. Is there one? No, there doesn't seem to be a facet for data source yet. So yeah, if there is no issue for that, then just create an issue in the Search API module, and we will see what we can do. I had kind of, but yeah, you can add a filter in views for data source. That's something you can do, but yeah, no way to facet on data source, I'm afraid, yet. Any tips on ordering for publish dates on articles and event date for events? Yeah, you can create a aggregated field. An aggregated field is an aggregation of several fields. So you could, for example, use the union aggregation, and then select all the date fields that you want to sort by here. And yeah, if one of them is only available in one type and one is only available in the other type, then the respective field will always be used for sorting. So, for example, okay, we're very near the end, but yeah, you can then use this in views to place a sort criteria on this new field. If you're using the authored field, which is available in all content as one of them, then you just have to be aware. Then yeah, you have to do it a bit differently. You'd have to use maybe the first or last, depending on the order. First or last aggregation types, you just get a single date value. If there's only one field value available for any piece of content, then yeah, union first, last do the same thing, all of them. So yeah. Okay, yeah, that's it. Just quickly a reminder that there are also contribution opportunities at this DrupalCon. So if you want to help make Drupal itself or any of the contributing modules better, yeah, visit those, please. And also, please remember to rate the session. Tell me what you thought. Tell me of any improvements you would like. I'm eager to hear your feedback. And yeah, otherwise, thank you for attending and hope you enjoyed it.